my dear and amazing friend. Welcome to part 1 of Alia Teaches You to Knit. Haha. Okay, so this are they're circular needles. I gave you straight needles, but these are circulars. They're the same size needle as the ones I gave you. So I'm using like the same size needles, and I'm using approximately the same weight of thread. So today I will show you how to do the knit cast on and how to knit once you've got the knit cast on done as well. So the first thing you do is you make a slip knot, which is you just basically pull it through and make a little loop. And if you need to like fast forward or rewind or slow it down or whatever, however many times you need to watch it, just go ahead and do that. So you put your slip knot onto your left needle, and how it works is that you always cast onto your left needle, but when you're knitting, you're always working from your left needle and moving stitches to the right needle. So it's like you're knitting from right to left, because everything, it's like you're going in this direction, but then everything ends up on the right. So you're always moving this way, but your stitches are always ending up on this side. So once you get your slip knot on, just take a look at your knot here, okay? So in knitting, we have, this is a loop, and so we consider this front arm here, this guy in the front of the loop, and we consider this bit back here the back of the loop. So a lot of stitches will either be in the front of the loop if they're not mentioned, or if they say through the back loop, they mean that way. So there's two basic stitches when you're knitting. There's a knit stitch and a purl stitch. And so when you're knitting, which is like I should say, when you're working on a project and the stitch and it's calling for knit stitch, you basically slip your needle from front to back through that front loop, and then you work the stitch. If you're gonna if the pattern asks you to purl, you would basically do the opposite. You would put your needle through the front loop from back to front. So the basic stitch that we will start out with today is entirely from front to back through the front loop. So, man, my little guy is being a jerk. Okay, so this is how you would do the knitted cast on. You start with your slip knot over your left needle, and I like to hold the stitch on there so that I'm not effing things up. And I'm teaching you to knit right-handed, even though I'm left-handed, because I learned to knit right-handed, and because I find it to be easier than trying to reverse every pattern. Like playing guitar left-handed was definitely a downfall, and one of the reasons why I never got any good at it, because I couldn't read tabs, everything was backwards, your fingers are placed backwards. So for me, I like to knit right-handed, and honestly, it takes both hands to do it, so you got to develop the coordination one way or the other. The other thing I want to mention before I actually create a stitch is that there is two ways to knit. One is called English and the other is called Continental. I learned English. My mom thought it would be easier for me to knit Continental because I'm left-handed, but I tend to like the English style, and one's throwing and one's picking, and I'll kind of demonstrate them both for you in case you decide you want to learn Continental. But as a general rule, I find it easier to control the yarn if I'm doing it as a thrower, an English knitter. So okay, enough gabbing. Okay, so for the first stitch, and I'm going to try and bring this as close as possible so that you can see. So you basically take your front, your right needle and push it through the stitch, through to the back. Take your working yarn, which is the one attached to the ball, wrap it around the back needle, pull it through, and now you have an extra stitch. And if you were knitting, you would drop this loop, but we're not, we're casting on. I'm sorry, I'm doing this with looking at it through the camera, so it's a little weird. So now you have two stitches on. You just basically take that and place it on the loop. So for the knit cast on, again, you do the same thing. Stick your needle from front to back through that front loop, wrap your yarn around the back loop, and then pull it through. I know this is super awkward. And then just place it right on the needle. So now you have 3 stitches on. So back through the front loop, pull the yarn around, pull it through and just slip it right over the needle. And you can just cast on as many stitches as you want this way. There's another cast on that I can show you later, which a lot of people use, called the long tail cast on. And that is the only reason why I'm not teaching it now is because it only requires one needle and fingers. But then again, you know, I was hoping to help you with the knit stitch at the same time. So I have 6, let's go to like 10. Okay. So, and the long tail cast on is one that's used often because it's pretty stretchy and has a good base. There's like a billion different ways to cast on, and they all have essentially different things. There's a cable cast on, there's a lace. I think this is also the lace cast on. There's just all sorts of cast ons, and they're all used for various different techniques. And that's what I love about knitting, is that you always have something to learn. And I am like one of those people who won't stick with something if it gets old and boring and never progresses. And so I think that's why knitting is so fantastic. And I have 3, 6, 9. Let's do one more. And let me tell you, knitting around a camera is really weird. Okay. Okay, so here's 10 stitches on the needle. And you can see that by doing the knitted cast on, I've got kind of this little bump at the bottom. And so now I have them on the needle, and you're like, okay, so now how do you get them to the next needle? Well, it's actually pretty easy. You know, and now we'll just start going the same direction. You basically just slip that needle, just like I showed you before, slip that through, wrap it around the back, pull it through, and then this time drop the stitch off. So now you have 1 stitch on this needle and 9 stitches on this needle. And I like to hold it with my finger so that they're not slipping off. Particularly these metal needles are really slippy. The wood is a little less slippy. I gave you a straight needle to start with because with the cable, manipulating the cable can sometimes be annoying. And the bamboo is going to be less slippy to start out with. And then if you like it, then you want to be able to buy the circular needle set that you like. I have my recommendations, but like if you get into it and you really like it, like then you'll be able to invest in a nice set of needles that you like really do what you want, instead of me buying you a cheap set or giving you one set of needles and then you feel bad because you never use them or whatever. So I gave you the decorative, pretty but completely functional bamboo straight needles, and if you end up liking it, then we can talk about circular sets. Okay, I'm gabbing here instead of doing this. Okay, so then again, through the front loop to the back, twist around, pull it through, and then drop that stitch. Through the front to the back, twist around, sorry, I'm centering it, pull it through, drop the stitch. And you can see that this looks like pretty much garbage nothing, and it will for like the first couple rows, because the structure of your knitting isn't really going to be in place until you get a couple rows in and you can really see what's happening. So I'm just gonna keep doing this until we get to the end, and then I will do another row and I will attempt to do continental knitting for you, and then you can laugh as you watch this, and I fail to do it with any kind of decency, but whatever. So, and again, this just gets into a rhythm. So through the front to the back, wrap, pull through, drop stitch. And the last one's always a little loose, so you just have to, and then you can, pull things down as you go around, through, and then drop the stitch. Okay, so now I've successfully knit 1 row of knitting, and you can kind of see that there's like stitches on the side, and then if I flip it over, which is what I will have to do to knit back, because now you need to have this yarn, your working yarn. This becomes your left needle. It was your right needle, now it's your left needle, and your working yarn is again coming off the back here. Okay, so this is the back side of what I just knit, and these little ridges here we call purl bumps. So if you flip it over, this is the front, it's a stockinette, and then this is the back, it's the purl bumps. So you know which side is the right side or the wrong side. Well, sometimes if you're doing stockinette, by all the little purl bumps. But if you just knit all the time and you never do purl stitches, so if you just turn and knit and turn and knit and turn and knit, then you end up with what's called garter stitch, which is a series of like knit stitches on one side and purl stitches on the other. And so you end up with like a couple purl bumps in a row, and it gives you this pattern, which I could totally look for if I have a swatch somewhere. I don't know if I do. Let me check. Hold on. Okay, so this shawl was knit in garter stitch, and you can see here, and maybe I'd find a lighter spot, so because the darker colors are hard to come up. So you can see that it's got the bumps, it's got the purl bumps, but it's got 2 rows. So if you pull it and stretch it kind of, you can see that there's a knit stitch and then a purl stitch, a knit stitch and then a purl stitch, a knit stitch and then a purl stitch. So this is like one of the easiest kinds of knitting to do because it's called garter. And then another one would be stockinette, and let me grab a stockinette. Okay, this has some lace thrown into it too, but this, where it shows up looking like what you traditionally think of knit, that's stockinette. And on the back, it's all purl bumps. And on the front, it's all stockinette stitch. And then right next to it is some garter for some comparison. Maybe I should have just pulled this one out at first. And garter looks, this is the back, the wrong side, the back side. It looks just the same. Garter, identical on the back and the front. Stockinette, all knit stitches on one side, all purl stitches on the other. Okay, now that I've completely gone haywire and done a bunch of stuff I didn't intend, we can go back to knitting, and I'll try to do continental. Okay, so in continental, like, people do this thing where they like wrap the, oops, that's the tail. That will happen. You will knit with the tail accidentally. I'm just warning you now. Like, people do this thing where they like hold it with their finger really, you know, and then they go in through the front and they like wrap the stitch. Oh, see, like, I stink at it. I stink at continental. So they go in, and like, I know I'm supposed to have like some like tension, and for some reason as a left-handed person, it's like ridiculous that I'm terrible at this, but I really, really am terrible at it. Okay, so you go in. All right, I'm gonna do one first in English so that I'm stabilized a little, because that was like, the end stitch is always the hardest. Okay, now let's try continental, you little jerk. And again, part of it is that I do stabilize the needle with my left hand, which is why I throw with my right hand. And I guess that's probably why, as a lefty, I don't love like the continental way of doing it, but like, really, some people really, really do. And they just kind of, you know, flip it. They go like, oh, this is a hot mess. They're just like, go through, pick it, and then come through. Go through, pick it. And my mom really wants me to practice this because she thinks it'll be better for my arthritis. And it looks to me like I'm like having a seizure with knitting needles. Okay. And there, I'm managing it. Continental. So you go through, that's why they call it picking and throwing. This is the picking. And then the other thing I did was the throwing. So picking, you pick it through, and then off, back, pick the needle, the thread, the yarn up, and then go through, pick, and then go through. And I like literally just did 9 stitches in continental. It's a Christmas miracle. Okay, and then last one. This is a travesty of knitting. Okay, that was me trying to knit continental. And as you can see, that was the knit stitch again. And if you flip back to our first side, bam, we have one of those whole like little garter bumps now on this side. That was not, it didn't have a garter bump before. We have one garter bump there, and now it's got like a 2 little knits. And so, yeah, and I may have split my yarn right there, but we'll see. So anyway, so this is kind of how it goes. I will knit one more row, and I'll probably save casting on for like, or casting off, sorry, binding off for another day, because it's definitely a lot to take in one video, but I wanted to give you enough opportunity to have seen it, and I'll move a little farther back now that we're now that, so I get my cord off from around the camera. Okay, and I'm gonna go back to throwing. So through the front loop, stitch around the needle, back, through the front loop, around the needle, through the front, around, back. And I mean, this is just muscle memory. It just takes time. It's going to look wonky. Your tension's going to be weird. You're going to knit too tight. You're going to knit too loose. It just, I mean, it was months before I was knitting at a reasonable tension. So even though I was doing projects, like the tension on them was not always the best. And so, and I mean, even now, my tension is all off because I just knit a crazy loose continental row. So, and then one, and then the last one. And now we have a little garter ridge. And, on this side too, and a garter ridge on that side. And you can see it's kind of growing. It's not looking like quite as ridiculous as before. I'll get it super close. Yay, this phone has really good ability to do that. But so there's your cast on edge, and then there's your garter ridge, which is kind of like little bumps in both directions. And you can see how many times how many rows you've knit by how many garter ridges you have. If you have one full ridge, that means you've knit 2 rows. On this side, and if here we have like 1.5 ridges, right? Because there's 1 ridge, and then this is the beginning, first half of the second ridge. So, and again, it's a little messy because of how it is, but I tried to use a light yarn so that the stitches show up really nicely, because sometimes on dark yarns they're hard to see. So this is my very first knitting tutorial. Hopefully it's helpful. Again, really do not worry about like repeating and like or rewinding and like, I don't know, there's this website called Craftsy that lets you subscribe to all sorts of amazingly good craft videos, including knitting. And they actually have this like slow-mo 30-second jump back where like sometimes I will just sit and be like, jump back, jump back, jump back, and like over and over, because I'm like, what did her hands do? I don't even know. So like, just don't be frustrated, because it just takes time, and I know you'll do it. And then we'll be old ladies knitting together someday and baking cakes, like really good gluten-free ones. I had the best gluten-free cookies the other day, and basically just having a ball, and because I think you will be good at it, and it's a lot of fun, and it totally relaxes me, which is something that I often need. And so anyway, my dear, my friend, I love you. Yay! Hopefully you'll find this video helpful, and I can't wait to send it to you. Okay, all right, bye.